You are listening to PatchBay on TYM KRS.
Welcome to PatchBay. I'm Whisker, and my co-host is Shane. We
Hey.
do audio recording stuff, and we sort of wanted to take some time out of our lives to share what we've picked up, I guess.
Yeah. The whole point is to discuss the weirdness that we've gotten away with and what worked, right?
Yeah. And we can talk about anything, so if you guys want to hear us go on about some strange topic, just let us know. Feedback at tymkrs.com is the email, and we're both on Twitter. You can find links to that on the About page over at patchbay.tv.
So we were briefly discussing off air about techniques and stuff, and this book that I've read that I recommend everybody to get. It's called Behind the Glass. And I was talking about it in the last episode. It's a whole bunch of different interviews with a whole bunch of different engineers, and what I get from it is that there isn't really any stat way to do something. A lot of guys will talk about compressing bass guitars, and they'll use this certain compressor, and other guys will only use this certain compressor, or they'll only use compressor A as long as compressor B is being used on the kick drum. And it, for me, what it comes down to is that there obviously are, good ways to do things, but there's no set in stone ways to do things.
Yeah, because we're talking about when you're talking about audio waveforms, it's such a complex and subtle thing, and any little thing that you do differently is going to affect it on some level. And if you're good, you can use the ways in which it changes things, good or bad, as tools in your toolkit.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. No, exactly. And like for instance, the default guitar amp miking technique would be the old 57 sort of situation. I myself personally like Sennheiser 421 more often than not. But I was reading in this book, there's one guy who did Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction, and he loves not the 57, the 58, which you wouldn't think. Normally, that's not the mic you go to for miking an amp, right?
Yeah.
But for him, because it's got a 2.5K boost on it, he always goes for that one for that sake, because he's not adding any extra, as you for whatever reason. That I guess is the reason, but that's why he would go for it.
Yeah, the Shure mics are all, industrial workhorse type of things, and there's any number of them in the line that you can use that are super inexpensive compared to what the studio guys may go to the mic closet for.
For me personally, as long as I have Shure and AKG mics, I'm good.
Yeah, you
That's
can
all I
make
need.
it happen if you've got some
That's
just
all I need.
good workhorse mics laying around.
And
I
even
have
like
a
the low brand AKGs.
I think I got like something like a PG48, which is one of their cheapest SM58 style vocal mics, and it's even though it's like a $20 mic, it's still sometimes it's just the right choice because of the characteristics that it has.
Exactly. In one instance, I remember reading an interview with Sebastian Bach from Skid Row, and the engineer, he set up a U87 in front of him, and he gave him a 58 on a stand, and he said, "Blow it. Like, I want you to destroy this microphone." And I think on a lot of it, they ended up using the 58, not so much because of the extra plosives or whatever, but probably just the direct part of it, but because he was so used to singing live through a PA, holding a microphone stand. That's one of the things that like singers can't. When you get a singer who's so used to singing live and holding onto a microphone, you stand them in a studio and go, "Here's your little circle where you can move and not move." Have you ever ran into that sort of issue?
Um, a little bit here and there, but what it really what brings it home for me is the early days of recording where you'd have sort of a jazz band standing around a ribbon mic,
Hmm.
and they're able to, as a small jazz quartet, they're used to standing in close quarters, being able to make eye contact and play with each other. Um, and if you were to put them in isolation booths where they can't see each other, you would completely destroy the dynamic.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why those earlier jazz recordings just completely blow out of the water a lot of the modern stuff.
The on uh, Miles Davis, I don't know if it was Bitches Brew or crap, one of his earlier recordings. The whole the point of the engineering, they had the ability to do more engineering, but there was basically one mic in the room, and Miles and the engineer decided that um, some kind of blue maybe. Uh, they both decided that when somebody needed to take a solo, they would step up to the mic, and that was the case basically. And there's something to be said about recordings like that. I've seen it even live with like a bluegrass band, one AT 30-30 or 40-40 or whatever, and the guys would just step up and go for it, kind of thing. And it's just amazing.
Yeah. There's uh, some of the bluegrass people do a lot of interesting stuff like that still to this day, and they'll intentionally buy up old studios from the older record companies who are no longer using their old spaces. Because the studio rooms have a certain character of those eras,
Hmm.
and they'll get picked up if you use a mic that is good at picking up not what you're recording alone, but also the room.
Hmm.
And they'll pick these rooms very specifically because the rooms were used on all of these great old recordings. And they'll keep the miking very simple and very direct because they're really in that space to capture that space. And not because it's a good space, but because the space sounds like what one expects the recording to sound like from a particular era. And I think it's a really interesting and subtle and clever way of approaching getting that sound that they're going for.
I actually recorded a song with this girl named Romy Mays from Canada. It's Romi Mays, and I did the exact sort of same idea. It was very limited miking, four people standing in a circle, and there were mics on a few instruments, like sort of the main kind of things, but no EQ, no compression, no nothing, just people in a room and basically fader writing live to tape. Like I didn't even multi-track it, and I posted it on the Womb forums, which I don't know if you go to there or if you're an audio guy, you need to check out the Womb forums because it's probably one of the best non-gear slut type forums. If you ask a question and you don't sound like a goofball, people will, who have credibility, answer your question. Um, anyway, posted it on there, and I got kudos from really, really, really big engineers for what I pulled off, which for me was less about my job and more about the fact that the musicians were amazing, and that's a really good thing to always remember.
Yeah, sometimes it's easy to forget in this era of in the box post processing sort of thing that there can be an element of performance to the engineering side of things that can really uh, help improve things.
Yeah, there are times when you have a really great band in the room that it really doesn't matter what you do. You could put the kick drum mic 6 feet away and it'll still sound amazing. Like there are like throwing any kind of miking techniques out. When you have a good band that's cooking in a room, the music, if you have really good music, it will always overdo any slightly silly technical stuff that can possibly happen. And vice versa, that can also happen too, although that's what we call overproduction. But um, when you get those opportunities where there's a band in the room cooking, um, it's just amazing. I did a jazz band a few years ago, and I went out and bought a pack of cigars and a bottle of scotch because I had nothing to do. Just set it up and like let them go, basically.
Yeah, interesting. One thing that I've noticed that, I don't know, kind of it hurts my engineer side, but it sort of makes my musicianship side happy, is that some of the most loved things that I've recorded have been done by just doing stupid things like, okay, we're jamming with the band and we're not set up to record anything, but somebody has like a crappy camera
Hmm.
with a little tiny electret mic,
Hmm.
just pushing record on the camera for video and throwing it on the carpet in the middle of the room and letting the band play. And then just putting them up, not in sort of serious fashion, but just like, okay, here's a jam session. You guys like it, you like it, whatever. Uh, and then they end up liking these things more than the well recorded, highly produced things. And you're like, oh, damn it. But
You know,
I'm glad you guys like it.
and there's a really important lesson right there. When you're engineering and you're doing the session, it's extremely important to try as much as you possibly can to be recording it. Not just so much, hey dudes, are recording and hit record, but just record everything. I usually try and run either a DAT tape or a cassette, even just of whatever mix I'm listening back to. Because there's these moments that happen um, that sometimes you can't always get back. Like, um, if you're recording in Pro Tools and you've got a click track going already, well, if the band starts sort of jamming something that's not based, the click isn't based on the song that they're working on, having quick access to being able to turn that click off in their headphones, but still keep it recording is a very handy, because there's stuff that happens that, you're never going to, it's like, disc tape is cheap, right? So record it. You can always cut it up and, bugger around with it after the fact, right?
Yeah. Speaking of cutting things up, um, I don't know how much you do in terms of more heavy cutting and putting things back together in ways that they didn't happen, not to fix things, but as a sort of creative way of engineering an album together. Do you do much of that sort of thing?
Um, yeah, I have. More often than not, I'm sort of Mr. Fix It. There's actually somewhere on my Twitter, I'll repost it. I have an edit that I did that had something like 300 or 400 edits in a 3-minute piece to get the guy back on the click. And I have a picture of the audio edit region, and it's ridiculous. But um, as far as sort of creating uh, 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 sections or I've done a bit of that. One sort of very interesting thing that happened to me. Keep in mind whatever you were going to talk about on this topic, but I had my boss's polka band did a song, and they did the old thing where they said, "We're going to play one verse and we're going to play one chorus, and then we want you to put it together." Have you ever had that happen?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay. But like one verse, one chorus, and that was it. And so they didn't do it to a click track. So, and what it was it's a very traditional sort of Ukrainian kind of tune where there's a slow part and a fast part. And the version that I got out of them was the slow part slowed down. So they start off like da 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 da, and then I had to paste in the 185-mile-an-hour fast part. And had they recorded it as a piece, it might have had a little bit of sort of railroading going on, but what ended up happening in the actual end of the mix was every single time the slow part would come on, it would start at a certain tempo and then like slowly go downhill because they slowed down naturally. And then all of a sudden I had to paste in this super fast bit, and it was like basically going up and down hills. Like it was probably one of the oh my god sort of situations. Oh my god. Anyway, so sorry. So why did you bring that up?
Before I get onto that, it's really interesting to see the difference of what musicians can do when you give them a locked-in click track for time
Yeah.
and when you don't.
Yeah.
Usually I'm stuck working in a situation where I want to have it quantized. So I'm usually looking to get that beat nailed down so that I can do the rest of my job more effectively.
Mhm.
And it really does make it a lot easier from the engineering point of view if it's on a very specific time, because you can do a lot of things in the
I
box
know.
off of that. But the amount of what's a good way of saying it? They can express so much more if you don't lock them down to a time,
Well,
and they can drift back and forth to bring more emotion into some things, I find.
personally though, I see. I've had this fight with even my band too about um, they claim it's groove when you're not playing to a click. I just claim that it's messy. Like you can still be groovy and hold it back a little bit or push it and still be in time. You don't need to be Pro Tools grid edited in time and perfectly boring, but um, everybody still needs to, if there's a break and everybody comes back on the one, everybody still needs to come back on the one, not 1.5. There is a. I mean, I think to a degree, some stuff I've recorded without a click does sound quite a lot better. But if you're doing stuff where you're adding a lot of stuff in after the fact, it almost is smarter to do it to a. For me, it's almost smarter to do it to a click off the
Yeah,
top.
it takes so much longer to try to track down each of the beats if you
You know
don't
what?
have it there.
What I was
But
gonna.
the only time I would ever suggest these days doing it without some sort of locked-in rhythm for the musicians to follow is if everything's being tracked live, then I think it's fine.
Mhm. What I was gonna totally. What I was gonna say is there's a thing called synchronicity, and if you track a band with a click, if you track a band without a click, and everybody plays to the drummer, and so all the decisions are based on what happens on the groove with the drummer, and then you go back in it and you redo the drums for whatever reason because he farted it up. You're now basing all the rhythmic decisions were based on the original drum track. So now you have a redone drum track where the drummer is trying to play to the band who was originally playing to him. And that can even become a problem when you do the click too, because if you record a whole band live off the floor to a click, and then you go back and you start redoing stuff, well, you've got, let's say, different groove elements, right? Let's say there's a second take of drums played to the click, but the original bass track was played to the original drums. Well, you have a off groove. It's not a lot, but you can have these weird grooved situations. You following what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that a lot of musicians will lose track of that and just say, "Oh, I got to redo this because I hit a bad note here or whatever."
Yeah, it's sort of
But
a downward spiral at that point.
but it can be, and that's where a lot of stuff, not even so much bleed, but a lot of stuff with when you have latency issues that can come up. Um, we're getting off topic, but it can definitely downward spiral out of control, and even if you tend to bring that up, sometimes it's whatever the case is, but it's definitely something to be aware of, and that's where I would sooner have a cooking, which we were talking about before, a cooking band in a room, and that's it, because these guys are feeding off each other right now, not a playback of what had happened a while ago, or you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, getting back
So,
to
yeah,
editing.
what I was gonna bring up there, I guess, is that uh, I kind of like to record the performance,
Mhm.
but the times where I've recorded the performance and then taken it and chopped it up into quantized slices and rearranged them, the it recomposed it to even be different melodies. Um, the results always get very, very good responses from whoever did the original performance. And you'd think it'd be the opposite, but when you have gone through it and sort of rearranged it to be have a better groove, to have a better um, uh, basically an impossible for a human to play sort of
Right. Yeah. I
thing,
know exactly what you're saying.
yeah, they hear it and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I wish I could actually play like that." I'm like, "Well, you
It's
can't
almost
actually."
borderline remix at that point sometimes, right?
Yeah, this
Like,
is definitely getting into remix territory.
yeah.
But I don't know, I always get a really good response of it. Like every single time I do it, I get a good response. It's almost like a guaranteed. So, as a more of an artist type, I kind of avoid doing it because it's like, well, if it's that easy to get a good response, then I obviously wasn't being an artist. I'm just doing what I know works.
Yeah, and there are times where people will default to that. I mean, even huge stars default to whatever sound it is that made them popular in the first place, and or techniques, or whatever the case is. But um, and then there's those times where when people go completely out of the box and try something completely new and it falls flat on its face. But getting back to the artist thing, I've done that before with my band. Before I was in the band, I did a like sort of a dance remix of one of their tunes where I just kept the vocal. And this is one of the reasons why having something tracked to a click in the first place is so much fun for the engineer. Because you can get all those wonderful loop kits. I do that a lot. I'll take a track that was tracked at 130, find loops that fit in 130, or elastic audio them to make them 130, and then just create my own sort of goofy, fun things and rearrange stuff.
For
You do that?
those who don't know, 130 is typically the yeah,
Moderate rock.
essentially it comes from disco out of Chicago, and it's boots cats is the drum pattern that you drop down on 130 to instantly change anything into a dance song.
Yeah, and then you go poof, poof, pats. Speaking of which, have you listened to Grace Potter?
I don't think so.
Okay, you gotta listen to Grace Potter. A, she's from down south, and B, the new thing I think that's happening in rock and roll is a throwback to the '70s sort of shtick. A, guys with beards, and sort of brown guitars. But Grace Potter, we've been doing this one song called Paris uh, live, and she's kind of a bombshell to begin with, so that helps. But great songwriter. Uh, on her tune, and it's hilarious because the song starts off. It's sort of like a grunge rock kind of feel to it. She's got a country little thing going on, and it hits the chorus, and it's boom, ah, boom, like like this is disco, man. It's totally. It's got it's a rock band masquerading as a disco band.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. It's just amazing how you don't even notice it when it happens, but it happens. I mean, Adele rolling in the deep. There's a ton of disco all
Yeah.
over that song. You know?
Yeah. I hear a lot of the stuff on the radio recently, and I'm like, yeah, this is disco, and the people listening to it have absolutely no idea
That's what I
that
was
they're
getting at.
listening to disco.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's
and
exactly what I was getting at.
it's like, okay, you've taken the four chords and you've put it to a disco beat. We've achieved the bottom of what we can do. Can we climb back out of the hole now, please?
See, if the guy from Chic would have realized that, and Nigel Rodgers, and would have went, that's it, I'm claiming, as my own copyright, like Harley Davidson tried to do with the sound, he would have been a friggin' million. Well, he's already a millionaire, but he would have been like quite a lot more millionaire than he already is. Uh, yeah, it's hilarious. We were talking briefly about putting songs together or rearranging songs. Are you familiar with Brian Wilson?
Brian Wilson. I don't know. I don't usually keep track of a lot of people's names. But what did he do?
Okay, Brian Wilson, formerly of the Beach Boys, released a record a few years ago called "Smile."
Now, is he the one that brought the theremin in, or is he a different one?
Brian Wilson was Brian Wilson was the producer, engineer, and a member of the Beach Boys, and pretty much the driving force behind the Beach Boys as far as everything, the writing, yada yada yada. A lot of the stuff that they used to do back in the day, they would do all the vocals. They were multi-tracking stuff, but they would do all the vocals around one mic and balance their harmonies against lead vocal on one mic when it was recording. Stuff like that.
Which seems like a really smart approach for them, for their style, yeah.
Yeah, well, A, to be in tune, B, but not only but they would balance. They were balancing their vocal volume for the track. So if you have me and you and Addie and my wife singing around a mic, and Addie singing the leads, and us three are doing the backgrounds, not only were we in harmony, but we were also making sure we weren't overpowering the lead.
Yeah.
That's a lot of forethought. Anyway, he did a record called Smile. And the whole thing, apparently, I think took 15 years in the making or something. And this was after the Beach Boys, after he was kind of out of them. And all of it was recorded piecemeal, as far as I know, where he would come in and he would say, listen, I've got a verse and I've got a chorus. And they kind of put it together after the fact. And apparently it's an amazing record. I've only heard it a few times, but just for me, that's just kind of weirdness just on an engineering level. And apparently, it had a lot of acclamation. Everybody really liked it and stuff like that. But even getting down to, say, doing like acoustic guitars, right? Like if you have a guy in a room with an acoustic guitar with a set of strings that's 2 weeks old, and he tunes it up, and the relative temperature in the room is, 73 degrees or whatever. And then 6 years later, Buddy walks in with a different guitar with a set of strings that's only a week old. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do you make that in any way sound right? Right?
Yeah. I think you kind of have to throw out the first one if you're going to redo any of it, personally. Cause...
Apparently it wasn't, though, and that's what blows my brain out of the water.
Huh.
But that whole record was to a degree, Pro Tools,
flexing the capabilities of what we can actually do now. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is the days before Melodyne and stuff like that. But like from what I gathered from the interview I read, Brian Wilson would come in and he'd lay down the verse and the chorus or something and go, okay, I need this 6 times. And then they would build from it and then pull stuff out and add new sections. And I'm like, oh my God, how do you... But it worked out. And I mean, here's a huge artist that did stuff like that.
Kind of reminds me of the place where all of this kind of started with Les Paul and Mary Ford making records in their house with the first multi-track recorder.
And actually unscrewing the friggin' head and moving it and then rescrewing the head back in. Because I think at the time he only had a head, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, before we completely call it, we were talking about sort of lo-fi things and just different ways of getting away with lo-fi or doing stuff to create different sounds last week. And when you record digitally, you're still trying to record sort of the highest quality possible, but even if you're sort of recording a lo-fi source, right?
course, yeah.
Have you ever tried to record a high quality source but at like 8-bit?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah? Okay. I was just curious. That it had popped into my brain when we were taking a break, and
There's
I
a
was wondering.
project that I'm actually thinking of trying to work on, an electrical project, which is to maybe use a lower resolution analog to digital converter chip at a slower sampling rate as a sort of very crude audio interface just for that purpose, so
Oh,
that
okay.
I can try to get recording. I think it would be particularly effective on percussion stuff, because when you take percussion and you record it at a slower sample rate, you get harmonic content coming in from the inevitable square waves, and
That's
square
top
waves have
off.
a
Yeah.
ton of harmonic content. And then when you take a recording that's been made like that and you bring it into a digital sampling package, and then pitch shift it around, you can actually tune the harmonic content of the square wave to be in tune with the parts of the progression as they're going by. So you can tune the artifact.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm into that kind of thing.
No,
Yeah.
I was curious because I mean, like, even in Pro Tools, obviously I can record it 8, 16, and 24-bit and whatever sampling rates. But even to bounce down the mix, I can bounce down the mix at 8-bit with the squeezer, and at 44.1, which is normally my sampling rate. And I think you can go down a little lower on the sampling rate. But I was just curious to know, if had you, I know, not Cubase, but Cubase's brother or sister, I can't think of what it is, but it allows you to have different sampling rates, different bit rates on individual tracks in a mix, which is kind of neat. I have to
Mm-hmm.
remember what the program is called. But if you were gonna, if you're recording, the analog drum machine that is really only 8-bit in the first place anyway, is there a sake to record it at 24? Kind of thing. So, it tends to make me wonder. And that being said, different instruments as well. I mean, you don't necessarily, stuff doesn't always need to be super high glass quality for the sake of it just being high glass quality, right?
Yeah, I think there's good reasons to record it in a high quality sometimes, and
Mm-hmm.
in other contexts, it's important to get the direct thing out of it. I can think, with that little 8-bit drum machine from like 1981 or something like that, you could record it direct in and get every single nasty sharp edge on that PCM waveform in the box. Or you could do something fun like run its output through a tube amp through a cab, and then put it in a specific room and record the room sound along with it. And in that
Mm.
context, you'd want to get a really
Crush the
high
crap out of it.
fidelity,
Yeah.
good, maybe even a stereo recording of that in that space.
Yeah.
And that would be you could go either way with that. It just depends on what you're working on, I think.
Well, and depends on the mix too. And this is one of those times where, when you're doing something like that, where you're being experimental about it, which goes against what I was saying before, but to record the extra versions of the same take, in different qualities or different miking techniques or whatever. Like before, we were discussing about, recording a guitar amp and doing it the default way, or doing it this way, and only keeping it, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, when you haven't decided what's supposed to be in the final mix, and yourself too, like at your example you were talking about, that when you're recording it, you might be like, oh yeah, like this is the like stuff right here, listening back to the room mics of the recorded amp version of the drum machine. But in the final mix, it might be electro pop, and you might end up with the very mono 8-bit drum machine. So it really depends on what the final outcome needs to be. Right?
Record both. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. That's all
We're
the
out of
time we have for this week, guys. I know y'all
giant
probably
TV.
want us to keep talking, but we're not gonna.
we don't get paid enough. No, we get paid enough. And also we need KRK sponsorship.
Yeah, that could be good. Yeah, so this show goes up every Friday at patchbay.tv. There's an RSS feed there if you want to automatically get the show on your phone for listening in the car or whatever, your iTunes, or you can just listen to it right there on the page in your browser. If you're at work slacking off, just push play. Super easy. That's it for us. We'll see you guys next week.
Good night.